unpacking today's headlines. This is Souls and Liberty in Depth.
Hello everyone and welcome to In Depth, a production of Souls and Liberty brought to you in partnership with MyPillow.
It is wrong to somehow suggest that an undocumented immigrant is a criminal. Being an undocumented immigrant is not a crime. I know what a crime looks like. An undocumented immigrant is not a criminal. 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 An undocumented immigrant is not a criminal, and we have to correct course in this conversation. We're not going to treat people who are undocumented across the border as criminals. That's correct.
All right, more on that later, but first...
You could have a complete flip of the table. You could have political parties coming to us, asking us, begging us, how they can, make this country more Christian to get our vote, as opposed to us kind of choosing the lesser of two evils every single time.
29 days to go, and abortion remains a hammering point for Kamala Harris. But now Melania Trump has weighed in on the topic as well, and it ain't good. Fellow Souls and Liberty contributor Arthur Clareau is here today to talk about this. I'm your host, Gary Michael Vorse, coming to you from here in Houston. Good morning, Art. Lots of consternation over the Melania stance on abortion.
Oh, absolutely. So much consternation. And I think understandably so. For a lot of conservatives, this was or Trump has been kind of the candidate that they felt they didn't have to make compromises on. That he wasn't going to bend over for the left. He wasn't going to, he was going to be the guy that they could just hold or that they could rally behind on all the points that conservatives and Christians have cared about for so long and always had to compromise on. But with this, I think there's more to it than meets the eye. And I think it's really important to understand that there's three parts to this. There's the political strategy and the constitutionality and that whole side of things. Then there's this kind of weird, sneaky sleight of hand, backstabbing, political intrigue side. And then there's also a part of this that's a lesson for us, and that is an opportunity for Christians as well.
Yeah, that's right, Art. I think one of the things that people are, kind of like, huh, what, upset about and everything is the fact that she's Catholic. Trump isn't Catholic. He has a lot of support from Catholics and, Roe v. Wade and all that in his first term and putting the justices on the Supreme Court. So there was a dovetailing there, but he's not Catholic. She is. She's got, prays rosary, she says, goes to the John Paul Center and, says a prayer, kneels down, says a prayer with Donald Trump there. People are like, ooh, Catholics are like, ooh, is he really Catholic? Ooh, is he going to convert? Ooh. And then all of a sudden she comes out with, this in her book. I mean, this puts her firmly in the camp of being a heretic. She's no different from this than Joe Biden is. I mean, they have the same position since they're both Catholic. That's the apples to apples comparison, not Donald Trump himself, but Melania.
Really, sadly, for a lot of Catholics and for the bishops and for so many in the Christian world, this is kind of just another day in the office. I mean, they've made it, they're so comfortable with politicians on the left maintaining this position. They're perfectly happy to shake hands with them. There's no real pushback against this concept there. So it's a little bit sad to see how comfortable Christians have gotten with this concept. And I mean, it is, for an average person, it can be very, I guess, especially a New York socialite, it can be very difficult to hold firm to your faith while also dealing with the world and the kind of feelings and leanings of the world, especially when the church is not helping to bolster that faith, if that makes sense. There's no community there, or very little community there pushing for that.
Oh, yeah.
But really, I mean...
That's definitely a point. I mean, the USCCB's track record on abortion and going after politicians Catholic politicians, who back it, or public people, in this case Melania, who back it. I mean, it's horrendous track record, horrendous. They don't give any money to the pro-life cause collectively as the USCCB. They don't take up a collection they take up 17 collections every year for everything under the sun. But there has never once, since they started doing that in 1969, there has never been one single collection from the bishops for the pro-life cause. They're simply out of touch with church teaching on this question. And I think that's what troubles so many Catholics when they look at this. It's like you hurt because it's Melania, who's the wife of Trump, and she's Catholic, and you'll remember, you comment on this, back in 2016 through 2020, it was like, oh, is Trump going to convert? Might Melania, she prays the rosary, at least says she does. There's pictures of her with that. I mean, is there, and all of a sudden, like, really? This is what's been going on the whole time? So, your thoughts on the feelings of Catholics / Christians, that this is kind of a state of betrayal, I suppose, against the pro-life cause.
Yeah, well, I mean, the difficulty to kind of build on what you just said is that even though Christians make up the majority of Republican voters, amongst Christians, those who actually want abortion abolished, those who actually have a very strong stance against this, basically aligned with church teaching, are actually a minority.
Oh yeah.
I'm just checking some notes here real quick, but as of Gallup recently, they're saying only 23% of Protestants and 24% of Catholics think that abortion should be banned nationally.
Yeah,
that's it, a quarter. And even though 56% of Protestants and 54% of Catholics believe it's wrong. So there's this disconnect, obviously, between believing it's wrong and actually wanting to take action on the fact that it's wrong. And of course, it goes back to, again, the support from the church. Is the church just responding to these polls and realigning its teaching based on that? Or are they failing to teach, and that's why these polls are showing what they are? Yeah. It's hard to know, but there's obviously some disconnect here.
Yeah, a big disconnect. All right, listen, when we come back, we're going to look at the political strategy over the abortion question in light of Melania coming out and saying she's in favor of abortion. And why is this the deal right now? Well, because Democrats are lying about Trump and Vance's support for an abortion ban, national abortion ban. So, abortion is front and center, always has been, but now it's really front and center. Stick around, be right back. The establishment has tried to assassinate President Trump twice, but we can't really be shocked that those who slaughter 1 million unborn babies each year would try to kill one more human being who stands in the way of their diabolical agenda. Trump, like every one of us, including all of us at Souls and Liberty, is a sinner. But like all of us, he is in the fight and fighting for all of us to get one more chance, maybe a last chance, to save the republic. We must hang together, or as Benjamin Franklin said, we shall hang separately. And maybe far sooner than many imagine, because communists take over and always persecute Christians and Catholics in particular. Let us help you fight these forces of evil. Become a monthly supporter today so we can continue giving you the information, the tools of our faith, and the support network you need to go out and save souls and save our nation. Join our merry band of happy warriors and click below to get into the fight. We need you, we need each other. Join the resistance. Become a monthly donor today. All right, welcome back. Art, what's the political strategy, do you think, in all of this? I mean, you'd have to be naive as can be to think that Melania releases a memoir right now in October, a month to go before the election, and says that she is in favor of abortion. really? They asked Trump that, and he's like, no, I just told her, write down whatever you want to write down and be true to yourself, be true to your heart, say what your feelings are. I don't know. I'm sure those are her feelings, but there seems to feel like there's a little bit of political strategy in all of this too.
I'm absolutely certain there is. We have to remember that politics is a very dirty game. And for what we see in the front end of things, there's all sorts of stuff happening behind the scenes that is, if I was to call it devious, that would be a very, very nice term for it. I mean, there's so many stories of Democrats actually funding Republican candidates that they believe will make Republicans look bad. There's so many different ways they can just kind of sneak in and get you as the voter to focus on some particular thing that they want you focused on. And it could be a case of they want you demoralized. You're not going to go out and vote because, I can't vote for this guy for whatever reason. He doesn't align with my values. I have to stay home. I have to opt out of this. But what we have to remember is you have to take everything that's happening and put it in context and look at the big picture, right? Donald Trump or Melania Trump's feelings aside on these issues, what has Trump done policy-wise, and what does he plan to do policy-wise, right? When it comes to this topic particularly, he's pushed it to the states, which is a very constitutional way of going about it. It also kind of aligns with what conservatives have wanted for a very long time, which is smaller federal government and more local government, more local involvement. And if we want these things changed, we can change them at our local level, at our city or state level. On top of that, there's also this, it's kind of a misdirect. It's a sleight of hand, right? Because you're saying, okay, look, see this, she supports this particular issue. You don't go out and vote. Stay home, show them that what happens when they don't follow what you have in mind, what you prefer. But what you have to look at is what is the alternative.
Right.
So if Trump gets in and he let's say he does nothing about this, he just leaves it to the people in the states to take care of. That is so far beyond what you'd get with the alternative,
Sure.
Not to mention all the other things he might do to kind of start moving us in the direction that we need to go. On the other side, you have someone who wants a nationally enforced, constitutionally protected right to abortion. You have someone who wants to pack the courts to make sure that happens. And God forbid they get that and they get some kind of constitutional convention, and the kinds of things that they'll tear out and put in would be horrendous. So the alternative is just a nightmare. And it is kind of like some of us who have very strong values sit here and go, okay, but it's the lesser of two evils thing. I don't want to vote for evil. I want to opt out. But
that's a very
when it
hard,
comes to this sort of thing,
hard
it's like,
position to defend. You can't say,
it
your
is.
lesser of
It
two
is, but-
evils. Well, where is what? I guess philosophically, where does something become, where does it cross the evil line and move into the good? I mean, is there a truly good candidate ever from a Christian perspective? Really? Who's that been?
And I think this ties into a little bit to you can look at it in a kind of fitness analogy or in a health analogy. If you've spent, 70 years is not realistic. Let's say 20 years with unhealthy habit after unhealthy habit. And that's what we've done politically, right? 70 years of bad decisions and unhealthy policies. And then you turn around and you expect just because you ate a salad, that's going to reverse the whole thing. That's not how it works. It's going to take you years of good behavior and of good policies and of good changes. And the first change isn't going to be fixing everything. And that's kind of how we need to look at this.
Yeah.
Trump is kind of the first change. He's not going to fix everything in one, especially not overnight, especially not in one term.
Sure.
It's not how it works.
Yeah. I mean, this is, it's interesting, and we'll get ready to go to the next break very quickly here, but I think sort of an insight might be helpful is Roe was seen, and understandably, was seen as this great big huge giant thing that prevented really anything that you wanted to get done. Everything was just sort of barely around the edges. Well, parental consent and this and that and everything else. Well, Roe is gone, but now what you have essentially going on in the states is the battle of a new Roe, state by state, 50 different little Roe considerations going on. So we saw in Michigan, for example, as soon as Michigan was the very first state that rushed forward and actually went beyond Roe with its constitutional amendment to the state. Okay, so now the pro-life movement has what? Now it has, instead of one big gigantic federal battle, it has 50 smaller, in the sense of, it's not a federal thing, 50 different smaller little battles right now. And that's the political strategy. And the pro-life movement was completely caught with its pants down on this. It's so focused on Roe. It had no plan for, well, what happens when Roe goes? You think the devil's just going to lay down and take his ball and go home? Anyway, look, when we come back, the oxymoron of a Christian nation at the ballot box. Stick around.
Go to mypillow.com or call the number on the screen. Use your promo code to take advantage of wholesale pricing for the first time ever on TV, including my standard size MyPillow, only $14.88. They've never been offered this low before. We have limited quantities at this price, so limit's going to be 10, and once they're gone, they're gone.
No matter who wins in November, we have to embrace that we are living in a post-Christendom culture. And the heart of that is a rejection of the gospel. As one item on our agenda to combat this, Souls and Liberty is hosting our first annual retreat at sea. You might be familiar with the annual event we produced for over 10 years at Church Militant. Dr. Jules Gomez, our Rome correspondent, and I are going to be doing the presenting, and the theme is Christians in Exile Triumphing in Adversity, which provides a whole range of discussions to think about. Now, we sail out of Galveston, Texas to the Western Caribbean November 10th to the 17th, yes, right after the election. I think all of us are probably going to need it one way or the other. Please join us for serious discussion, spiritual preparation, and bonding, very important, bonding with fellow Catholics. Registration information is provided below and on our site at soulsandliberty.com/retreat-at-sea 2024. So sign up and we hope to see you there. All right, Art, talk to us about the percentages of Christian voters, so-called Christians, that is. I mean, we shouldn't even be discussing the question of abortion in Christian America, right?
It's mind-blowing thought when you look at the numbers and you realize that the United States is still, to this day, 65 to 70% Christian. The electorate is 65 to 70% Christian. And when you look at the policies and the way that politics works, and you would never guess that. Not in a single day would you guess that we are a vast majority Christian. Of course, if you're talking to normal people, you would, but not politically. And that is a big problem. So for example, if you look at some of the things passed by minority religions, Islam, Judaism, some of these other things, or minority groups, you have massive protections, massive political clout. You have politicians bending over backwards to wish them happy this and that or the other, or to apologize for whatever it is, like for whatever slight or offense might have been given to this small group. If you looked at American politics, you'd think that those groups are the vast majority. They make up 6% of the U.S. electorate, 6%. And so there's a huge, again, disconnect between Christian Americans and how they're dealing with politics. Yeah. And part of it probably is unity amongst Christians, right? We have our divisions, we have our discussions, our little conflicts between us. But I think that there's enough commonality. I know there's enough commonality amongst us that we could put some of that aside to bring together kind of the points that we unite around. And from there, we can utilize literally just the same political strategies that these minority religious and ethnic groups are using. And you could have a complete flip of the table. You could have political parties coming to us, asking us, begging us how they can, make this country more Christian to get our vote, as opposed to us kind of choosing the lesser of two evils every single time.
Yeah, it does seem like that. Well, let me raise two questions for you as we kind of wrap up here. One is those very tiny minority groups that all collectively add up to about 6%, because of them not being Christian, they have the added bonus of the amplification of the media. Media goes after them and spotlights them and this and that. And oh, look at this. And oh, look at that. And oh, this is awful. And this can't be the case. That's been going on for decades now. And has really ramped up since Trump, came onto the scene in 2015 as presidential candidate in 2015. The second point, I think, within Christians or Christian groups, sort of the body collective of Christian Catholics and Protestants, is there's theological differences, obviously, but culturally, the irreligious left has really done a massive job of invading and diluting Catholic and Protestant teaching, conservative Protestants, on this, in this whole area of family and, abortion and contraception and all of it. So there really isn't a unified, who would the media go to for the unified voice of Christianity? It doesn't exist. So they go to their favorites, the liberals, the irreligious left, and quote them left and right in every article and put their faces all over TV and the whole bit. And they propose to people that this is a Christian stance, that somehow somebody trying to get across the border has equal, deserves as much protection as a baby in the womb. Not true. And that's not a Christian, point of view at all. But these are the challenges that I think you rightly point out, that within Christianity, there isn't a unified voice because there's a fake Christianity. I'm not talking theologically, talking politically and culturally. There's a fake Christianity that is able to garner people's attention because of the media.
Every single one of these groups that gets a lot of media attention, that gets this spotlight, that gets political attention, they have a series of carrots and sticks that they use to get that done. This isn't just magic. It isn't that everyone woke up one morning and decided that we now like these minority groups better. We like these, political ideas better. This was done with method and with intent, and there's a process that can be replicated. For most of these things, you have wealthy backers, you have legal teams, and you have lobbying and think tank groups, and those work in tandem to either reward those who would go along with it or punish those who go against it. And we kind of saw it with the Covington situation, right, with those kids in Washington,
right,
when the media completely smeared them.
Mm-hmm.
As soon as that lawsuit went through, oh boy, did they back off. And
sure.
they're still not very careful, but they've been more careful about that sort of behavior ever since.
Right.
The point is that these tools are available to all of us, right? And when it comes to the question you said about the unity aspect of it, there's more that unites us than that divides us. And it really it's a matter of will there be people who will step up to try to bring this together? That's really all there is to it. And the alternative, again, since we're looking at alternatives, is we don't do anything. We continue down this road as we continue to become a smaller and smaller portion of the electorate.
Right.
There's no time like the present when it comes to this kind of thing.
Yep, well said. That's it. We're going to leave it there, Arthur. But yeah, this is the vexing question of abortion on many levels. Obviously, the first one is a question of justice. But as these, terror centers continue to be propped up by the Democrats and too many Republicans and too many people who believe it's Christian and it's okay, that has a spillover effect, obviously, politically, psychologically, emotionally, all of it. It's the greatest curse of Western civilization right now. They've reached a point where people can stand out and say, I'm proud to have killed my child, sometimes more than one. Arthur, thanks for coming on today as with your usual very good insights. We'll, of course, be having you back on because, first of all, you're a Souls and Liberty contributor. And secondly, you always got great thoughts. All right. Thanks, Arthur. All right. Take a look at this again.
It is wrong to somehow suggest that an undocumented immigrant is a criminal. Being an undocumented immigrant is not a crime. I know what a crime looks like. An undocumented immigrant is not a criminal. 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 An undocumented immigrant is not a criminal, and we have to correct course in this conversation. We're not going to treat people who are undocumented across the border as criminals. That's correct.
Kamala and her communist buddies are playing a shell game, and your future, my future, is on the line. Hence, there is a moral duty to vote. A moral duty, not just a civic duty. There's a moral duty to vote because they want to construct a country where you and your neighbor, and you have an obligation to your neighbor, are seen as, slaves or serfs of the state. The withdrawal of human dignity given to us by God. That places now a moral duty on us to vote. As we know, the Democrats, the communists, have brought in millions and millions of illegals, and they've shipped them to battleground states. Now, as J.D. Vance pointed out in the debate last week, and he got cut off for talking about this and revealing it, the communist Democrats, have applied a law incorrectly and designated them, the illegals, as not illegal. And because of that, they are able to swear them in now as citizens at an incredibly fast rate and then register them to vote immediately. It's a total end run around the naturalization system aimed at watering down your voting power so that the country can be taken away from you and me. No one knows the numbers or the effect of this, but this late in the game, the only immediate response is to register. You to register. Make sure you are registered and then go vote. First, the individual states' deadlines for registering to vote is fast approaching. Some of them have already eclipsed. It's too late. It's almost too late in many states right now, depending on the state. So please click on the provided link we have there to the site that comes to us from the Concerned Women of America, who've put together the deadline list for all of these states and when you have to make sure that you're registered to vote by. You should also share that with friends and make sure that they follow up. And then once you've registered, even though you think you are registered, make certain the state has you on the rolls. Call and double check. Go in. Make sure. Can't tell you the number of stories people show up to vote because they registered a little later in the game, still legitimate time frame, but they registered later. They show up to vote and they're like, oh, you're not on the polls, sir. I don't see your name here. So make sure that not only you've registered, but you be active, be proactive, and make sure that you are actually on the rolls. So when you show up to vote, you're ready to go. Then, of course, vote. The country is being stolen away through illegal actions by communists who have way too much power. The only response, again, at least at this point, is to overwhelm that illegal activity with a larger number of patriots canceling out illegals being given the vote illegally, but being claimed, as you heard there from Kamala, that they're not criminals. Really. It's 13,000 murderers, tens of thousands of rapists, hundreds of thousands of convicted felons, and these are the people that are going to be voting? God love you. I'm Gary Michael Voris.